Welcome, proud parents and guardians. Welcome, class 2022. I've cherished my time with many of you, my darling cherubim, and my lovable cheese balls. And I love you both. Thank you for voting for me to speak. I'm pretty sure if I wasn't retiring, I wouldn't have made the cut. And I appreciate this goodbye, Mr. Chips moment. Although I'm an English teacher, I'm not known for speaking with alacrity or aplomb, but I'll give it a try today. Graduates, for you, today, the future is a wide open story. You're about to embark on an outward bound adventure to college, but also an inward bound adventure into adulthood. I'd like to address both. Regarding your immediate outbound adventure, my mother sometimes used the maxim, good things come in threes. There's basically three things that will guarantee you success in college. Three things to help you achieve your ambitions that you are now even wondering about. One, show up. Show up for class, especially first period. 80% of life is showing up. M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled said that self-discipline and self-love are sisters. So love yourself enough to do your job. Create routines and stick to them. Wake up on time for first period and make your bed every day. Love yourself enough to do that. As Lady Macbeth says, screw yourself to the sticking place when she was trying to get her husband to murder Duncan. So have the courage to love yourself enough to perform. And by the way, the other 20% of life, show up with a good attitude. 2, read your syllabi carefully. Some professors in college are not going to tell you what to do. They are just going to expect you to do it. But every professor is required to give you a roadmap, syllabus. You'll never be surprised about a due date or an assessment's criteria if you get each syllabus into your DNA and read and reread the instructions carefully. 3, take notes. Figure out if your professor is a textbook teacher or a lecture teacher. Then, when scanning the textbook, take notes, or during lectures, take notes. Embedded in the textbooks and lectures will be the answers, or at least hints, to answers on upcoming tests and essays. In The Death of a Salesman, Willy Loman's wife says, attention must be paid. Pay attention and take notes. Now, regarding your inward bound adventure, you are on the cusp of adulthood. Now is the time to practice becoming fully realized individuals. Toward the end of the movie Dances with Wolves, a Sioux chief played by Graham Greene says to Kevin Costner's character that he believes he is, quote, on the path of the true human being. The path to become our authentic selves. Class of 2022, I know a lot of you. Some of you are budding artists, some athletes, some researchers, some are actors, writers, scientists, and, God help us, politicians. These are worldly ambitions, but what about our human ambitions? What kind of adults are you going to be when your parents aren't around? Because of my age, I possess one thing that you don't: experience. And what I've discovered is that living an authentic life involves striving for some semblance of humility. H-U-M is the Latin root which means ground, earth. It's the root word found in human, humor, humane, humiliation, and humility. Humiliation is accidentally showing up at school in your underpants. Humility, according to Merriam-Webster and Cambridge Dictionary, humility is an outward expression of an appropriate inner self-regard, a virtue centering on low self-preoccupation, which means you're being of service in the community. It contrasts with narcissism, hubris, and other forms of pride. A person with humility is devoid of arrogance or self-pity, two sides of a coin called pride. It's impossible for a humble person to be a bully, because if you are at peace inside yourself, it would never occur to you. I was running this concept by one of my pals, and he said, "Hey, WD, my humility is great." I said, I think you should go home and look up the word irony. Now, my wife, Kane, is here, a couple of my sons, a couple of my grandchildren, and I have colleagues to the left and right of me, and they know me. If there was a line graph, 0 to 10, 0 being devoid of all humility, and 10 being metaphysical certitude that I am one humble guy, I'd be lucky to be graded by them somewhere in the middle. I am not the spokesman for humility. I have picadillos and foibles that emerge in varying degrees many days. Still, this must be said. It must be said now, and it must be said to you, our next generation, our next hope. Good things come in threes. To follow the path of the true human being basically requires three things. 1, reflection. Socrates said an unexamined life is not worth living. Most businesses take inventory. They update their ledgers, see how to improve. We need to do the same for ourselves. In the disengaged nihilistic 70s, I rarely ever turned off my stereo or my 8-track stereo in my truck. But now I have a routine, and I stop every once in a while and take a self-survey of my words and my behavior. Graduates, you need to start training yourselves to turn off your phones when you're alone. If you don't do this, you will not be able to be an introspective person and be able to reflect, which is critical to becoming an authentic human being. After reflecting, we are able to live more honestly in the present moment, where God is, or what I like to call the spirit of things is. I'm not qualified to pontificate about God. Mark Twain did. He said, quote, "God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favor." Okay. I do know one thing. I get no help from the firmament when I'm walking around in the past with my two friends, regret and resentment. And I get no help living in the future where my pals' anxiety and fantasy live. That's when, quote, "time is out of joint," end quote, which Hamlet says to his mother when he's worried. Reflecting on my past behavior helps me to act more humane later in the present moment. 2, open-mindedness. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, Polonius has a talk with his son who's about to venture off to university, and he says to him, quote, To thine own self be true, then to others you cannot be false. One of the byproducts of seeking the truth is open-mindedness. Who here actually has explored Western and Eastern religions, discovered the practice of non-resistance, the pitfalls of attachment, examined the differences between man-made religion and natural spirituality? How many people here actually check out Fox News and MSNBC? How many of us actually resist confirmation bias, anodynes and bromides caressing our own beliefs? Your history teachers and your English teachers taught you to find reliable sources. I expect you to do that. Who here actually chooses critical thinking over cozy tribalism? Becoming open-minded is a skill and an art. I'm not fully open-minded yet, but I'm better than I was. I choose to be an independent thinker. Let me put it this way. Try going out to lunch with a truly open-minded person. It's delightful. 3, perspective. We're social creatures. We need others to show us the different perspective than our own if we are going to stay on the path of the true human being. We need people in our lives who care enough about us to tell us the truth, not yes men and yes women. We need people modeling kindness, commitment, and curiosity, who give their time and energy to the community. Hey, sort of like teachers. I'd like to end with 2 short anecdotes about perspective. That a new perspective was given to me by someone else. I have an older friend, Pat, and he asked me to go to this sort of self-actualization seminar back in the 90s. If you picture a triangle, at the wide base is simple life, survival, food, shelter. In the middle where it's narrowing is love and belonging and self-esteem. And by the way, if you want some self-esteem, do some esteemable things. And at the very top, at the apex, is the extremely small area where the self-actualized person lives. So anyway, Pat's sitting next to me and we're listening to this speaker, and the speaker, he says, most intellectuals have a hard time becoming self-actualized because their egos and arrogance get in the way. Most beautiful women and handsome men have a tough time becoming self-actualized because of all the attention they get from others. And most rich people have a tough time becoming actualized because of all the diversions they can pursue with their money. Right then, Pat leans over to me and he says, "Hey, WD, I think you're going to be just fine." Now, that's pretty cool to have a friend who is nimble enough to keep my ego in check and make me laugh at the same time. Decades ago, I was talking on the phone with Carlton, an older friend of mine, and I told him that Carol, my ex, we were much too young to have gotten married, had invited me to drive down to Winston-Salem to share Thanksgiving with my boys, David and Ben, who were 8 and 7 years old at the time. I thought this was a perfect opportunity to apologize for my part in the divorce. Carlton paused and asked me what I was going to say. I hadn't really thought about it too much. I said something like, well, I'm sorry I strayed, but you strayed first. There was a long pause on the phone, and he told me to come over to his house. So I drove over there, and he sat me down at the kitchen table, and that sentence was revised into phrases like, "I'm sorry I was so immature and so self-involved. It was wrong of me to give up on us so easily without trying harder. I regret not communicating better with you when we were struggling. I'm sorry I couldn't comfort you when I knew you were hurting." I talked for about a half an hour. My ex barely said a word to me. But soon after I arrived home, I got a call from Ben, the 7-year-old, who asked me, and I could tell he didn't believe he needed to ask me this question, and it was a little irritating for him, but he had to do it. He said, "Mom wants to know if you're dying." I told him no, and he said, "Okay." But you see, Carlton helped me revise my prideful language into language of the heart, which Carol obviously didn't know I was capable of. So graduates, you are on an inbound adventure, and good things come in threes. Reflect, be open-minded, and find perspective in relevant friends. Class of 22, I envy you. For you, the future is a wide open story. Thank you.